Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be talking about the revolving door of the American prison system. We'll also be talking about a federal judge who's resigning because, well, he doesn't think he's making enough money. We'll also be talking about children being banned from parks in the United Kingdom, the African Union may be turning into the United States of Africa, and a whole lot more tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. With you, as always, is Toby.
And Nick.
I'd like to invite the viewers to log on to our website, freemindstv.com. From there, you can get all the archives of the show, Free Minds Radio, show content, and a whole lot more, all at freemindstv.com. All right, we have a ton to get to today. I want to start out by talking about the prison system and the jail system here in the United States. Anyone who's familiar with Free Minds TV is aware that 1 in 100 adults in America are currently behind bars, and 2.2 million adult Americans are caught up in the jail system. Now, this is more than any other country in the world, including a so-called communist China, which has a population much bigger than ours. Now, the land of the free, the home of the brave. Why is it that we're locking up so many of our fellow neighbors, friends, family members? Why is it that 1 in 100 of us has to be behind bars, Nick? Now, I know that there's many different reasons for this, the war on drugs for one, and a whole lot of different reasons. But one of the reasons, I think, has to do with this revolving system we have, where someone will go in for, say, a misdemeanor. They'll get put out on probation. They'll maybe get drunk or smoke a little pot or something. They'll offend their probation and then go to jail for sometimes even longer than the first sentence would have been if they had not gone on probation in the first place. And they kind of get caught up in the system and never are able to get out. And then we all have to not only pay for them, but live with the fact that we're locking up our friends and family members without, sometimes they haven't harmed anyone at all.
Yeah, I mean, most of the people who are going to jail in the United States today are there for non-violent drug offenses. And even other crimes, there are a lot of other victimless crimes out there as well that probably don't merit jail time. That's the bulk of the prison population, and that's one thing that keeps people in prison. Even if they did commit a real offense, a lot of times it is probation offenses that aren't really offenses. They leave town without asking their parole officer, something like that.
Well, it's very easy to offend probation. It's not like you have to actually go out and commit another crime like suspended sentence, or I guess even with suspended sentence, it's much easier to re-offend. Say just getting drunk or something that's not a crime if you're on probation. And you're caught for that, well, you're going to go back in the slammer. So it can be quite catch-22 for a lot of people who just can't seem to figure out how to get themselves out of the system.
Right, and I mean, there is a tough-on-crime mentality that has sort of made its way into American politics. And, you know, certainly real crimes do deserve real penalties for people who are breaking into houses, stealing things, assaulting people, things like that. There are plenty of real criminals out there, but the way the system has been set up, it makes no consideration of the fact that the criminals are still people. Even if they've caused some kind of real offense, there's no reason to trap them into that system. It doesn't have good results for society as a whole. I mean, if somebody becomes institutionalized, they're pretty likely to reoffend and just essentially become a drain on society. A lot of people just get used to being in jail, or half in, half out, and it's not productive. I don't think it really reduces crime.
No, it doesn't at all, and it costs us all a ton of money, and then we have to live with the fact that, well, we are paying to put these people behind bars and take away their freedom. I want to get into one case that is a little bit more outrageous than most, though. So shine some light on just what can happen if you focus in on certain jails in the American jail system. Overland Park man fuming over jail sentence error. This coming from Kansas City Star. Imagine spending a month in jail because of a paperwork mix-up. Then, after you get out, they bill you $875 for fines and accommodations. Now, this is talking about a man by the name of A.J. Marino out of Kansas City, who was supposed to only be going to jail for a weekend. He was supposed to be spending a couple days behind bars for a small misdemeanor charge. paperwork mix-up got him stuck behind bars for a full month. Then when they finally released him, they said, well, you have some accommodations to pay for. That'll be $875 for your stay here. He's like, what? I mean, you were supposed to let me out a month ago. I stayed here for an extra month. Shouldn't you guys be giving me money? Well, apparently things don't work that way when you're dealing with the government, and they are still going to be demanding this money from him. Which means, what's he going to do? He doesn't have the money. He also owes the state and the city a whole lot more in other fines from other small misdemeanor charges. He's no saint by any means, but he's not actually going out and hurting people, at least according to this article. He's just someone who can't seem to get himself out of this revolving door, which he's stuck behind bars in. So right now what he's facing is even more jail time for failing to pay his $875 as well as some other fines he owes, and he's looking at going back to jail where he is going to be given even more accommodation fees and fines for staying behind bars. Now, how is he supposed to break this cycle? They lock him up, charge him money for staying in jail, even though he has no means of making money while in jail. It would be one thing if he could make license plates or something, but he's just stuck in a cell. Then when he gets out, they say, now you owe us this much money for staying in our jail. He says, well, I don't have the money. Well, you go back in, and then you'll owe us even more money when you come back out. It's a very vicious cycle. How do you get out of this, Nick?
There's not really a good way to get out of it unless somebody else loans you money, which is the reason that, at least for private debts, we abolished debtors' prisons in the United States, because people said, well, how am I supposed to make the money to pay back my debt if you keep me locked up? Which is a good point. Unfortunately, when you owe money to the government, they don't see it the same way. You'll still get locked up for owing a debt to the government, whereas you wouldn't for a private debt. Once upon a time in a different country, you might have. But it doesn't make very much sense to lock people up if they can't repay your debts, especially if you're charging them more and racking up more debt for them by keeping them behind bars.
Quite the catch-22. Now, I just don't really get this mentality of the government folks out there saying, now, debtor's prison is a bad thing in private circumstances where, say, I owe you $1,000, I can't pay you, so they lock me up. That's a bad idea in private circumstances. Why is it suddenly okay when you owe the government money? Why do they then say, okay, it's a great idea, let's lock him up because he owes some money?
Probably because they're the ones who make the rules, and they like the idea of being able to lock you up.
But the mentality shift is just, it's completely asinine. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you logically come to the conclusion that in private circumstances you shouldn't have debtor's prison, well, what's the difference? Where's the chain in logic break off and go down some other avenue?
Well, in this case, it's actually even worse because, as I was trying to say, when you had the private debtors' prisons, they weren't racking up more debt for you because you were behind bars. You were in a government jail, essentially, and you couldn't pay back the debts that existed because you couldn't work and make money to do that, but you weren't incurring more and more debt every day being behind bars. So this is even more asinine than doing that for a private debt.
It's completely ridiculous, and it's just one of the many reasons why we, here in America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, the freest country in the world, well, not so much we put more people behind bars than any other country, not even per capita, just more people, and we have a very small population.
And that means that judges are working hard. However, some judges probably want a little bit more money than their work is worth.
Well, if you wear a tutu for a living, or a muumuu, or any kind of a dress, and you're a man, you might be a little bit embarrassed, and you might think that you owed a little bit of scratch for what you do. And the men in black robes, or dresses, or muumuus, whatever you want to call these costumes that they wear, well, they want some money for looking a little bit ridiculous when they get in front of people and give down their edicts. And this is coming out of Connecticut, where a federal judge is quitting because, well, he's simply not being paid enough money. Now, how much is not enough money? $169,300 to be precise is what he's making, and he says, well, that's just not enough. Cost of living expenses have been going up over the years, and as a judge, just not getting by. So he has quit the bench after 23 years. Judge Alan Navas, he's just fed up with how the members of Congress can give themselves pay raises and other government and federal employees raises, but not these poor judges who are just barely scraping by with a $170,000 paycheck every year.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you have to say?
I don't know. $170,000 doesn't sound like bad money.
No, it's not bad money at all.
But look at
very comfortably with $170,000.
So the attitude he has about it kind of bothers me because he feels he should be getting more of the taxpayers' money. I think that what he's getting paid right now seems a little bit steep.
I was going to say let's cut him by, say, $120,000 a year, and that would be okay.
I mean, if you're in public service, the idea, at least the idea that people in favor of government tend to espouse, is that you're doing it to serve the people. I don't think that's really true a lot of the time.
Well,
clearly this case illustrates that.
I'll serve the people for $170,000.
But if we are going to have a court system, and I think on some level, yes, we do need a court system, shouldn't these people be doing it because they want to help, I don't know, provide good judgments, give good, good sentences, something like that, as opposed to because they want to make a lot of money at it? I mean, if he wants to make a lot of money, I'm sure he's probably passed a bar exam, and yeah, he can go into private practice, become an attorney, and make a lot more money. But one has to wonder, why did he enter into this field of being a federal judge in the first place?
Well, $170,000 is not bad, Nick. And I think I'd enter into it for that too. And he was under the impression that he would be getting these pay raises every year. Actually, he's not the only judge who's upset about this. Apparently, there's a whole lot of them. 7 judges, federal judges from around the country, have recently filed a lawsuit seeking back pay from 1994 for adjustments in living expenses. Can I file a lawsuit against, say, the federal government for taking more and more money out of my paycheck, even though my living expenses are going up? I mean, does it work both ways? If you can sue them because you don't think the government's paying you, federal judge, who's making a whole lot more money than most people in the world, especially here in America, making much more than the average person, you're making a whole lot of money. You're suing us, though, essentially suing the people when you sue the government, saying you want back pay for since 1994 for adjustment in living expenses. Well, meanwhile, all this money that you've been raking in is coming out of my pocket. Meanwhile, my living expenses are going up. Who's going to pay for that?
If this guy was making that $169,000 23 years ago, you have to remember that if they haven't adjusted for anything at all, that was really good money when he started. So I can see why he's saying, well, things are getting more expensive and I'm still making the same amount. But he was probably making the equivalent to something like $250,000 or $300,000.
Millions and millions of my tax dollars ago that he said this. So when he has millions and millions of our tax dollars in his pocket and he's complaining that he's not making enough, boo-hoo, cry me a river, get lost, hope to never see you again. You were probably a scumbag anyways. Let's move on, Nick. Let's go on to the Downsizer Dispatch, see what those fools in Washington are talking about and cooking up for laws and what we as citizens, as common folk, can do about it.
Well, tonight for the Downsizer Dispatch, we're going to be talking about the Read the Bills Act and the One Subject at a Time Act. And there are 2 bills that just recently passed that illustrate the need for both of these measures that Downsize DC is pushing. Congress is pushing through the 680-page stimulus bill, which has a lot of provisions in it, 7 titles, which are different subjects, and it's going to be at a cost per family in the United States of over $4,300 a year. Now, it's 680 pages long. Granted, they've given this one a little bit more time than the last bailout they tried. I still doubt that most of the representatives who are going to vote on this measure have read very much of the bill. You also had a 1,248-page Public Land Management Act that includes 15 titles, so 15 different subjects in one bill. So it's supposed to deal with everything from forest management to ocean and water rights disputes and paralysis research. They put it in what's titled a Public Land Management Act. They put paralysis research in there. Now, maybe you're somebody who thinks we should be spending money on paralysis research. Well, why not have the paralysis research in its own bill so we can debate that and vote on that on its own merits instead of rolling it into another bill? And you have 15 subjects rolled together here. If there's one subject that a representative thinks is a must-pass issue, and they're rolled into these bills a lot to make sure that the bill will pass, they're going to vote for the bill. They're going to vote for all 15 subjects, not just the one they really care about. This is why a lot of times you'll see representatives voting for something while at the same time saying they don't agree with provisions of the bill. And that's a problem. What Downsize DC is proposing is that Congress pass a law or an act that would require them to address one subject at a time. So the title of the bill has to be relevant to what's actually in the bill. if you're having 3 or 4 different subjects, they need to be split up into different pieces of legislation. So you might think it's a good thing that Congress is passing fewer laws. Well, if they're rolling everything into a 1,300-page bill, it should probably be broken up into, say, I don't know, 130 or 1,300
bills.
Well,
Nick, that would just make too much sense. And these dirtbags in Washington, well, they're not about that. They're about getting their pork involved and getting their bill through. Whatever sponsorship agreement they had with whatever corporate company out there. I guess we call those lobbyists, but it's really sponsorships. It would be nice, you know, I've heard someone suggest this before, if the representatives in Washington had to wear some kind of a costume similar to, say, race car drivers, where it's like Pfizer written down this one sleeve and McDonald's on the other sleeve, and every single corporation or that gives them money, that's tattooed all over their body, so that we can know who they're actually representing. Because everybody knows, it's not a huge secret, they're not representing us. They're representing big money, and that's why they're dirtbags. Am I radical for calling them dirtbags, or do the general population know that by now?
Well, usually the general population only calls the representatives dirtbags if they're in the opposite party. Most people tend to group themselves as Republican or Democrat, and they look down on the other party. They tend to give their people a pass. But my opinion is, for the most part, there's a few exceptions, for the most part, Republicans and Democrats are right in throwing stones at each other and accusing each other of not being honest in the way that they govern.
All right. Well, anyways, regardless, let them know how you feel. DownsizeDC.org is the website and to do so. And, hey, maybe while you're at it, give them that sweet idea of having them actually show who they're representing. They could be like NASCAR drivers instead of those ugly penguin suits that they wear. Anyways, when we come back, we are going to be talking about the nanny state over in London, as well as some news coming out of Africa and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV.
This edition of whatever it is you're watching is brought to you by
Ridley Report, Ridley Report, something, 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 Ridley Report. Ridley Report, Ridley Report, something, 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 Ridley Report.
Free Minds TV is brought to you in part by Life Productions for your basic and semi-pro video production needs. From full wedding and event coverage to DVD authoring and distributions, lifeproductions.com. That's lyfproductions.com.
And you're watching Free Minds TV.
This is William from New Hampshire on Graham watching Free Minds TV.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. As always, it's Toby here with you.
And Nick?
And see how we don't have a set yet for our show? There's still just lights back there. That's because we need a few more dollars. If you want to help us out, log on to our website. freemindstv.com is the address. And help us build a new set. We're very close to our goal. We're nearly there, but we could use a little bit more help trying to make this show look as professional as possible so we can get on more TV shows and spread the message of freedom and liberty as far and wide as possible. But speaking of the message of freedom and liberty, well, it's in jeopardy in a lot of the places, not only here in the United States, but all over the globe. And there's some recent coming out in Africa. Nick, you've got the story?
Yep. Apparently, the African Union has appointed Muammar Gaddafi as its president. A lot of you who are a little bit older will remember that Colonel Gaddafi was basically the military dictator of Libya. Libya was involved in some terrorism incident in Lockerbie, Scotland. So generally most Americans look at Gaddafi as a bad guy. And I would agree. I mean, he's essentially a dictator in Libya. Well, for those of you who don't know, the European Union's not the only union out there, the supranational union. There's one in Europe. There's one in development in South America, publicly, and there is one existing in Africa. So far, the one in Africa has been a pretty weak union, but it's not like the EU, because obviously there's quite a bit of instability in Africa that doesn't exist in Europe. It's, you know, people are killing each other in their own countries. They're probably not looking to integrate into one country with a whole bunch of other nations. But Gaddafi would like to see it that way. He would like to see the 53-member body move towards essentially what he describes as a single currency, a single army, and basically a single trade policy. So he's looking at turning Africa into what was described by Tanzania's president as the United States of Africa, or another EU.
Well, Nick, you know how centralization works so great. So if we could just get all the continents to start putting themselves together, that'll make it so much easier for us to eventually create a one world government and have one currency throughout the entire world and have one government, and then things will be perfect. So this is just the first step in creating a perfect society.
How could things not be perfect when you have Colonel Gaddafi now potentially in a position to rule all of Africa, not just his, one little dictatorship in Northern Africa?
It should also be mentioned that there are some proponents of making a North American union to create a union between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. So it seems like there's some central planners all over the globe hoping to make this a reality and take away not only our sovereignty, but sovereignty from nations around the world. And everybody who's familiar with the concepts of liberty and freedom will know that centralization like this is not a good thing. It puts the power in fewer and fewer hands. Fewer and fewer people have the power, which means we, the people, well, we lose the power when we give it away and put it in the hands of just a few. But we must move on. We've got to go and pick on the UK, because what's a good show without talking about the nanny state? And who's better at nanny stating than London? This coming from North London, actually, where they're getting some record snowfalls, as we are here in New England, where we're broadcasting from, specifically Keene, New Hampshire. Well, over in London, they're also getting quite a few feet of snow. It's just causing some school delays, as well as some, yes, park closings. Children banned from snow-covered parks by Health and Safety Brigade. Children have been banned from playing in snow-covered parks after health and safety officers deemed them too dangerous. Now, why are they too dangerous, folks? Well, they're covered in too much of that scary white stuff we like to call snow. Yes, that's what's creating the dangers in these parks. It's the stuff that falls from the sky. There's just too much of it. And what if the children slip and hurt themselves? What would ever happen then? The Camden Council in North London decided to lock all of its gated parks because of the snow made the pathways too slippery, Nick.
Yeah, it is sort of rare for London to get snow. So this isn't something they have every year. I guess it's odd for them to get a lot of snow that actually sticks around. But isn't that more of a reason to go out and, say, build snowmen or do something like that?
This is the opportunity of a lifetime for kids. This is creating memories. Being a kid is getting out there in the snow, especially if you don't get it all the time. Get out there, have fun, and be a kid. These safety and health officials over there just seem to think that that's too dangerous. Going out and living life, we just can't have that. It's too scary out there, and we need to keep these kids inside, plugged into the TV, so that nothing hurts them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about a lot of these people who are very concerned about safety to the detriment of civil liberties and just your freedom to move about as you like. The problem is that they're so worried about what could happen to you out there in the world that they create a nanny state, which is worse than those possibilities. I mean, I think the idea of having a free society where maybe a couple of kids will go out, slip and fall on the snow, maybe get a little bit hurt, but most of the kids will be able to play and have a good time. I think that's preferable to the nanny state that they're creating in England. They're so risk averse that they're just taking all the fun out of it.
It's not just New England, Nick. I mean,
not just England.
Not just England, yeah. It's happening here in New England, too. I mean, the nanny statism is spreading across the country where there's so much protectionism going on from these little youngsters that they're never going to have the opportunity to go out and just live life. We've reported many times about different towns and different school districts banning tag on the playground. Yes, because tag in some school districts and some towns view tag as too dangerous. And what if you fell while you're running and skinned your knee? I mean, this is the mentality we're dealing with. Imagine being a kid and not being allowed to run at recess. No running games whatsoever, walking only. Imagine being a kid and when it snows outside, they close down the parks because what if you slip and fall? I mean, this is just disgusting. How are these kids supposed to grow up and live a functional life when we're coddling them and protecting them at a very, very young age and never allowing them to get the bumps and the bruises they need to get in order to see what life is all about?
It's a good question. I think the problem is that they're not going to get that experience, and we're going to have a generation of people who just either they're going to be very risk averse or they're going to have no idea what risk actually is and make bigger mistakes when they're older.
And meanwhile, while we're keeping the kids inside, so that they don't skin their knees. We're wondering why they're all getting fat. Genius right there, people. And I'm sure the same policymakers who are saying that the kids shouldn't be running at recess or going outside when it's snowing so that they don't get hurt are the ones who suggest a raise in like sweet tax, like they're doing over in Massachusetts, trying to raise taxes on any candy and stuff like that. It's just utterly disgusting. You officials make me sick. But another thing that makes me sick is some of the police action that's going on in New York, Manhattan specifically, where there's been some pretty nasty police stings as of recently, and they're targeting, yes, another minority group. This time they're once again going after gay people, people who live alternative lifestyles. The police have been targeting them to try to go after them for prostitution. Now, we're against any kind of sting operations in the first place. I mean, if someone's going to go commit a crime, especially a victimless crime like this, we don't need the police helping them out. I mean, prostitution is something where there really is no victim. It's two adults living in supposed free country making a contract between themselves. But this Puritan society of ours says, no, 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 you can't do that. That's illegal. You go to jail for such things. And they go so far as to try to catch would-be prostitute purchasers, buyers, however you want to say them. They go out there and try to bust these people in the act by soliciting them for prostitution. And what's been going on in Manhattan is they've been going into some adult gay video stores, hiring some very young, good-looking gay men or cops to act as gay men and go in and pick up middle-aged men, older people who are, say, in their later 40s and 50s, go in there, pick them up, offer consensual sex, and then as they're walking out the door, slip in, and why don't I pay you $50 for it as well? Without even saying anything, at least is what a lot of these people who have been arrested are saying. They don't even respond to that. They're just baffled. They walk outside and are arrested for soliciting prostitution. Does that make any sense whatsoever, Nick?
No, I mean, it sounds like basically they're just setting them up and they're not actually even doing a real full sting operation. It sounds like when the police officer is just throwing in the idea of money, that's not what the sting operations are usually. The traditional way was they would pick somebody who looked like a prostitute, put them on the street, and they would at least wait for people passing by to offer to pay them for sex. So the person who's getting arrested actually made the offer. If the cop is bringing it up, that seems like entrapment to me.
It definitely is. And even if it's disgusting no matter what, any sting operation, well, you haven't found enough murderers and killers out there. You're not really doing your job. If you're on the vice squad and you're a police officer, look into Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, leap.cc. It'll teach you a lot of things and maybe make you feel a little bit less like a dirtbag. I like that word, Nick, dirtbag. It's a good word to use against these useless bureaucrats.
I think some people on the Vice Squad think they're doing the right thing, but they overlook the fact that all of these government policies, by and large, have failed to actually reduce the behavior they're intended to attack, whether it's drugs or prostitution or anything else, and they're arresting consenting adults much of the time, right, like this case, or grown-ups who want to maybe smoke marijuana instead of tobacco. They get thrown in jail. That doesn't seem very fair.
I agree with you, Nick. Some of the viewers might agree with you. Some of them might not. We'd love to hear your feedback. fmtv@freemindstv.com is the email address. We're going to have a bonus show today because we've got to talk about why we don't have our full crew behind us. There's some interesting stuff going on. Log on to our website, freemindstv.com is the address for all the ways you can watch that and a whole lot more. It's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a great night.
Free Minds TV is brought to you by FreeKeen.com. FreeKeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. FreeKeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. FreeKeen.com.